Welcome back to the Big Screen Bols podcast, where you have myself, Caleb Kindle, and the leader of the Autobots when it comes to this podcast, Christian McCrite.
Shoot, I got the Autobots, dude. I was hoping for Decepticons.
Oh, not today.
That's right. I'm one of the bad boys. You know what I'm saying?
Well, maybe if everybody would like, share, subscribe, we might do a retake and he'll be a Decepticon.
But obviously, from that, you're gonna guess that we're gonna be talking about Transformers.
Transformers, one of the best toy sales group of all time.
Of all time.
And some of the best cartoons and anime. I guess you wouldn't call that anime, sorry. But some of the best cartoons growing up as a kid.
Cartoons. Yeah. The Transformers more than meets the eye, which is a phrase that was super overused. And the Michael Bay movies, which are definitely movies, that's for sure. They're actually kind of a guilty pleasure of mine. I actually kind of like Transformers. Like, I was just about to rip on it, but realistically, I kind of like them.
Yeah, you can't.
They're fun.
You can't say like it basically made beauty in a period of time, like 2008, like Megan Fox, like that was every guy's crush back in the day.
And Michael Bay didn't want to hide it either. He's like, I want to make sure we have 2 straight minutes of her leaning over this hood of this car.
The craziest thing was like she wasn't that old.
How old was she?
Well, I know in Jenny's body she was under 18. I'm pretty sure.
So she couldn't have been much older than that?
Yeah, I don't think she was.
But she was probably like 20.
Yeah, no, I think she might have just been barely legal to do a bunch of stuff like that. So
it's kind
Michael Bay, sorry, man. You're kind of a creep.
Yeah, you're kind of a weirdo, man.
You produce this film, but
that being said, I love Shia LaBeouf, and I love him in those movies.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, yeah, we're talking about some of the beginning Transformers. Again, for you young folks out there that haven't seen those movies, you probably have, just because it's one of the most...
It's a popular movie.
They're probably popular. But Shia LaBeouf was one of the perfect like humans for that role, just because he was so awkward.
He is. He's like that like frantic, like nerdy schoolboy.
Yep.
Yeah. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of like almost like a Peter Parker in a way. Kind of like that. Not exactly the same. I mean, those are 2 completely different characters, but like the same concept. So yeah. I actually kind of like him. And then they replaced him with Mark Wahlberg. And now we have, I can't remember his name for the life of me. But
Anthony Ramos.
Okay, so he plays Noah in the new movie. Do you have any info for us about the success of this new movie?
Yeah, so this movie, I think it's shot, just talking about the box offices and everything like that, it's shot in the middle.
Yeah.
It's profitable. That's a good sign for movies. There's been a lot that haven't been successful, but taking to the box office at $423 million, not too bad.
It did what a lot of other movies did, was like it did well its first weekend.
Yep.
And then it dropped off. Like that's been happening a lot lately.
Yeah. Which again, there's just so many movies coming out. But
yeah, I mean, you're seeing things like back to back. And of course, it was around the time that like it was close after or something to the time where like Across the Spider-Verse was being released.
Yep.
Like a week or 2 after.
It took a little bit from that, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then all of a sudden there was something right after it and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 53%. IMDb gave it a 6.2. So, yeah, we're shooting about pretty average for a movie.
Yeah. Now,
like all those metrics, maybe a tad bit on the lesser side.
Yeah.
I'd say, because I feel like Rotten Tomatoes, usually if you're in the 60s or 70%, that's when it kind of starts to become a good movie.
Yeah.
And not a bottom tier or lower movie, I should say.
And you also have to understand, like, in what world are they going to give? I mean, like, I shouldn't say in what world. Hopefully in our world someday, some Transformers movie will hopefully get like a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like hopefully someday like a great Transformers movie will be made, but most of them have decent to not so decent reviews. And most of that is for the critics. The audience loves them. Like your general casual like moviegoer like us, like we enjoy them. And so like the audience score for this film is 90%. Once again, there's that split, and I definitely think that part of it is how it's rated, because it doesn't mean that all the audience thinks it's a 9 out of 10, but it's like 90% of 100 yeah, not 90% out of 100% of regular audience people who can put their reviews on Rotten Tomatoes uh, gave it like a thumbs up or like a at least a 6 out of 10, which is interesting to me because that just shows the difference between like the critics and the audience. Where like audiences were much more casual. We're like we're okay with not having the best of everything. So you're going to expect a lower score for Transformers, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad movie because that's very subjective based on the target audience.
And I will say as well too, like going into this movie as a fan of Transformers, have a bunch of the toys, all of that. I came to this movie with not a lot of expectations, just because of a lot of the dumpster fires that have came up in the Transformers franchise
Mm-hmm.
after the first two movies.
I I totally understand. I think most people liked the first movie, the first Transformers movie, and then people had their qualms about the second movie. A lot of people like the third, some people hate the third, and then the fourth and the fifth were not well received across the board. And so going into another Transformers movie after Bumblebee, which that was a solid movie.
Yep, I would say
Bumblebee's a
Bumblebee
solid
was one of the last that was like, okay, now we're starting to turn around a little bit.
Yeah. So like I kind of like this whole reboot thing that they're doing, which is kind of nice. But now we have this one, Rise of the Beasts, which the basic plot follows this guy named Noah who is trying to get a job. His brother has health problems, and he just wants money to be able to afford him to get the care that he needs. And well, as you'd expect, he happens upon the Autobots. He wants to he tries to do like a heist of some sort to try to get this specific object, or at least part of it, called the transwarp key. Of course, he didn't know what it was, but he was going to break into a museum, and it all spiraled off. There's this not professor girl. She's like some sort of intern at the museum, and she's really fascinated with artifacts.
I don't know if intern would be the right word. I think
sure
she
what
actually
she
is
is.
an archaeologist or
Yeah,
of some sort of person within that field, that she's just not the lead.
no, and she's like pushed down by like having to get coffee for other people. That's why I use the word intern, is because like
Yep.
she does things that's below her qualifications, and so she tries to look at this piece of artifact, because they introduce a lot more stuff in this movie. They don't always go through each individual transformer, but they introduce the concept of Terracons, which is completely different from the Autobots and the Decepticons, and they introduced the Maximals,
Yep.
which is like animals but Transformers. And I don't understand really most of it. I really wish there was like a movie that would show like the origin of these creatures.
Yeah, there's a cartoon that kind of explained a lot of it.
Sure, but I wish like we had like a movie for that, because like
I
I've seen
gotcha.
like we've seen like bits and pieces of like the war on Cybertron, but I wish we had more of that. I want to see what things were like before the Transformers came to Earth. Because who wouldn't want a war on Cybertron movie? Like, holy cow, the video game that I used to have did fantastic, and the story was incredible, and they do it in the TV shows and comic books or whatever they have for it, but they haven't done it in a movie. And I'm like, heck, they would make bukus of money and for a movie like that.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, so the Transformers are already on Earth, and they've been on Earth for a while because they're well, obviously stuff with Cybertron, the war on Cybertron, but the Maximals also went to Earth because Unicron, this giant, if any of you know anything about Transformers, this giant world-eating sort of Mechanicus thing.
It's like a transform. This is what I got at it beforehand. It's like a Transformers, but it's the size of a planet.
Yeah.
But it needs to live and eat off of other planets to survive. But go ahead.
Yeah. And so like his main man is called Scourge, who is played by Peter Dinklage, which I almost didn't recognize throughout most of the film, but he's actually pretty cool. I think Scourge was pretty cool. And Scourge, he kind of gets introduced, and he like wears all like the badges from all the Autobots and Decepticons and stuff he's killed, which I think is pretty cool. But his job is to basically to clear everything out or get whatever Unicron needs to be able to consume that planet. And so, but they need this thing called the transwarp key, and the Maximals have it, and they try to break it in half, and it gets sent to Earth, and it gets differentiated. So this whole movie is another, like a lot of the other Transformers films are about like a chase for an object. Like a lot of them are like, we have to go to point A to go to point B to get object A to get to point C to get
fulfill
B.
this objective. And
Yeah, so it's still kind of the same formula, but the Transformers, I think, have a little bit more personality in this one. Like Optimus Prime is kind of like this hardened veteran that has a hard time trusting and very kind of like abrasive personality, which I think is very interesting. Like he kind of learns like to care for humans more, because he really doesn't care for them at all whenever he first shows up. But Pete Davidson, like he just kind of came out of nowhere, and like in like the world of Hollywood, and he does fantastic as Mirage.
Yep, I was definitely going to say that. Like,
Yeah,
because I think there was a lot of times where they just gave him. Stop me if I'm wrong here, but you're the only person here, so you're gonna if you'd want to stop me. But but there's situations where he had to read his lines, and he's just like, "How can I read this in a goofy fashion to make it kind of a joke?" And he was able to do that and pull that off super, super well.
yeah, he's a very likable character.
Yep. And so I think there was a lot of things, and I think there's a lot of times where he was just like reading the script and just like had it down, like he understood what he was like the meaning that he was trying to say, but he just like said it in his own words to make it come off really well. So I think that's also one of the good things about now hiring comedians, more funnier characters for roles, because they seem to be the ones that want to go more above and beyond compared to the action movie stars that are out there.
Yeah.
Like Dwayne The Rock Johnson or Vin Diesel and all that, with like giving you over the top performances just because they want to be, that's just their personality, is to make people like them.
Yeah, like natural charisma will always be more powerful than forced charisma.
Yep. 100%.
So like like I agree, it's good to have comedians in that role, because not only are they able to bring charisma and like a goofiness and like fun to their character, but it also doesn't always sacrifice the emotional aspect to it.
Yeah.
Because the only tough part about people who are strictly comedians, and I say this in a way of like Kevin Hart, Will Ferrell, sometimes they have a tendency to, whenever they get into really emotional movies, they don't like it's hard for them to differentiate comedy from serious emotion, because in their world, no matter what's going on, good or bad, they turn it into comedy. That's their job. And so doing the opposite of that is probably extremely difficult. So that's the only tough part about it, but it's not an issue here.
Yeah, I
It's
think
actually pretty good.
I think a big thing too is that within those, like a role where you're not actually acting, you're just doing the voiceover of it. So that's what the beauty of it is that you don't have to be the one showing those facial expressions, even though they're not your facial expressions, but they can CGI that transformer to do whatever it needs to do,
Right.
or mock it to make it look whichever way it needs to look to make the scene work. All you have to do is just
Read the lines, bro.
yeah, or fit that dialogue into what they're doing there.
Yes.
And make it work. So, and I think comedians are really good about reading people as well too, especially stand-up comedians.
Yeah.
I know Jack Black's not a stand-up, but he's also been a performer. He's had to perform. The reason I bring up Jack Black is I thought he did an amazing job in the Mario movie.
Heck yeah. 10 out of 10, bro.
He was singing that. Christian was singing that right before we turned on this podcast, by the way.
I'm glad the camera was off while I was doing that. So
Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We might see
a music video coming out on the channel. I don't know how to play piano.
But enough down this rabbit hole, though. I thought Pete Davidson did a great job. I thought he did probably the best out of almost anybody that acted in this film, including Anthony Ramos and then some of the other human characters within as well.
Yeah. I still think I still think the human aspect could be um could still be better. Like it was good in this movie for what it was, but it felt very much like these characters have likable things about them, but they're kind of thrown into situations and they just kind of say like, okay, or they don't react as much to like aliens and things like that. That kind of blow my mind a little bit. It'd be different if it was already an established universe where like so like the first 4 or 5 Transformers movies, like by the second or third one, people, or at least by the third one, people knew that Transformers were out there, and because they caused devastation to cities and things like that. So that's one thing. But like in this movie, it still feels like the acting is still good, but I feel like the lines of dialogue and how fast they push through things does make it seem still kind of cheesy.
Oh my
But
gosh, yeah.
I don't want to dog on it too much because that's kind of their like Transformers is just cheesy in general. But like Transformers is more of like a sci-fi action like thing. It's not really a character study or a character dive like Oppenheimer. So the two different natured things. But I did think that part could have been better because there are some lines of dialogue where I'm like, okay, someone had to look up some sort of inspirational quotes on the internet and give it to this main character to say, read that line. That'll sound really cool and heroic in this
Yep.
movie. And I'm like, this is coming across very cringy.
Yep.
And like the acting is still really good, but there's a lot of lines in here
A
that
lot of writing, yeah.
that I'm like, I don't know about that. And the the pacing was fine. The pacing was good. They go through things pretty quickly. I did think this movie could have benefited from an extra 15, 20 minutes of with talking more with the Autobots or showing more of like the human families and things like that. I feel like it could have benefited from that more because this guy went from like zero to hero in a very short time span. And Shia LaBeouf was kind of different where like he felt like he was a small, almost helpless human in a world in a war that was much larger than he could ever imagine. But he became important for these offshoot reasons. And at the end, he stood up to Megatron at the end of the first film to put the cube into his chest, which was like a showing of his bravery that he didn't have any other powers or anything. He could have died, but he did it anyways. This movie kind of takes that and flips it, where like the human character is like good at sneaking around and they have to constantly remind Optimus Prime that hey, we're humans, we're small, we can do things.
But Christian, before we go too much deeper into this, what would you rate this movie before we actually get too much deeper into the plot of it?
Um I'd give it a solid 7.3 or 7.4 out of 10. I'm gonna go with 7.3. I think it's a solid movie. I think it's better than some of the other Transformers movies. There's a couple people I saw this with who said it was their favorite, and
Hmm.
I do not think that is the case for me. It's what this is like the sixth. This is like the seventh Transformers movie.
Yeah.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Holy cow! This is like the seventh Transformers movie. I'd probably pin this at probably number 3 or 4. I still I'm a big fan of the first Transformers movie. I think it's a good movie. I love Age of Extinction, which I know people hate on, and it's got Mark Wahlberg and like the dinosaurs and stuff. I understand that it's a really goofy movie, but I really like that one. But this one I give a 7.3 because it's still better than like a lot of the other ones, like The Last Night or Revenge of the Fallen, things like that. So long story short, 7.3 is what I
Okay.
go with.
I'll shoot from the hip and go 6.5 on this.
Okay.
I did like it. The same time though, after watching this, I went ahead and watched the first and second Transformers back again, and I just saw so much of the plots that were tried to be made similar. Or it's one of those things I just feel like Hollywood, Paramount, looking for money, said, "Okay, this worked one time before. how come we can't copy it? Let's see if we can just copy this as closely as we can, except let's add more diversity to the cast so we cover our bases there and make it all work out at the end. I don't know. I just think that's very unoriginal
Yeah.
um, of Paramount and Hasbro from building it like that. So
Mhm.
I just felt that was something that kept stabbing me the whole entire time. That and then, be honest too, the visual effects of it before we actually get into more spoilers of it. I just don't think Optimus Prime looks as good in this movie as he did in 2008.
It's a weird line of like the design of the character looks closer to what he would look like in the cartoon, but there's something about that that seems off. Like obviously it's CGI, so it's CGI versus a cartoon, so whatever. But there's something about like the very like he's very blocky. He looks less like a transformed robot and more just like a set of blocks that are kind of strung
He
together a
looks like
little
he's from
bit.
Minecraft.
Kinda, yeah. And so like I get that. Um some of the other ones don't really have that issue, but he has that issue. And that's like the main Autobot. So when you have that, you know, whatever. Uh some of the visual effects, as you say, are not so great. Like the main battle is in like a barren wasteland. Like that's such an easy thing to do. Like, oh, like let's just have them fight across this barren rock. And it's like, come on. Like you couldn't have chosen any more different kind of environment
Yep.
or whatever. You chose just rock, which is pretty much like the wasteland fight for any action hero movie like ever.
Yep.
So whatever.
So
Um
that's my official rating of it. Before we get too much deeper into it, log off. Still watch the movie. It's still worth it.
yeah,
It's
it's
going
a
to be on
solid movie.
Paramount soon. You have Paramount. Go ahead and tune into it. Jump into it from there. So
Um spoiler aspects. Um Scourge is interesting. Scourge he is a I don't really know what to think of him because Peter Dinklage doesn't really sound like him, even though he's the one who voices him. He's got like a cool dynamic to him, and he does like in the beginning of the movie, he does kind of whoop everybody around a little bit, which I think is cool. Like he just bodies the Maximal Guardian. Like this is like at the beginning of the movie, the Maximals are holding the transwarp key. They're trying to get it away from, and so this Maximal's brother or dad or something, he's like another gorilla, is trying to hold back Scourge, and Scourge just bodies him. And I'm sitting here thinking, this dude's for real.
which that opening scene is what he's talking about. Opening scene was badass.
It was super cool actually, because like it's like at first I thought they were on Earth, but they were on a different planet. And I'm sitting here thinking, what is this? And then Scourge it like starts walking out of like a dark like forest, and he's the way he speaks, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. So it started off with a bang, that's for sure. And then he bodies some of the other Autobots. He kills Bumblebee straight out. Like he murders the guy without a second thought.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking, how many like out of all the Transformers movies we've had, has there been any one of the movies where anybody's just absolutely destroyed Bumblebee?
Not Bumblebee.
Not Bumblebee, because
know-
Bumblebee's the fan favorite.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, but in this movie, he gets whopped.
Yeah.
So, which was kind of cool to see because it made their villain seem like he was an actual threat. Because even Optimus Prime and him went head to head multiple times in the movie, probably 3 times, and Scourge basically won 2 of them.
Yeah, and basically at the end, the only way he was able to win was because of the ass pull stuff that happened there at the end, which that leads me to my next thing. I'm going to give you 3 bad. I'm going to give you 3 good here.
There you go.
Make this short. Let's make this quick. I already said one of them. Unoriginal plot. Wasn't original. I think the future of Transformers, we need to have more of a Transformers just movie and just cut the humans out of it. Like, I don't know
agree.
why it needs to be the same exact plot of a human needs to find some certain object that only a human can find. Like, did it do great within the first 1 and 2? I thought it did great.
Yeah.
It made sense. He had a certain background that was able to fulfill this, and that. But quit beating a dead horse at that point. 2 thing, a lot of the ass pull stuff. Sorry for my language. I've been saying They were a bunch during this one.
That's
But at
okay.
the very end of it, the armor somehow magically attaches to him, and he's able to be this amazing fighting warrior and stuff. I was like, this isn't Power Rangers, this is Transformers.
I didn't know whether I liked it or not because when that happened, like, so for those of you who haven't seen it and are listening to the spoilers, Mirage basically sacrifices himself to keep Noah hidden, and then he dies and then is kind of not dead, and then tells Noah that he has to take on him in a way, which is weird. And all of a sudden, like, Noah gets like this Transformers, like
Iron
Tron,
Man
like,
suit.
yeah, like Iron Man Tron looking suit, and starts shooting and starts holding his own against Scourge, who bodied Bumblebee and nearly beat Optimus Prime twice if Optimus Prime wouldn't have ran away.
And destroyed Scourge to basically death, and somehow Transformers have this magical power that they can make them merge themselves with another human.
Yeah, which I don't think I've seen. If it's in the TV show, that's one thing which I don't think I've seen all of that. So if it is, let me know. But otherwise,
I didn't remember it if it was on the TV shows at all. I just thought it was real ungenuous, and then I thought at the very end where, oh no, we have to stop the key or type in this special code to make it end. Oh, we weren't able to do that, so we got to go somewhere else. And there's a moment where they talk about it's like, okay, if we're not able to type in the code, if we're not able to stop the key from going into there, he's going to basically come, and we can't stop it from there because if we stop this, it's like the power of destroying a star. So the whole entire world will blow up, is what I'm thinking of.
yeah.
Because a star is a lot. Earth's not that big. But it's like, oh no, I'm just going to put my fist into here and turn it off now. And the Earth won't blow up somehow.
Yeah, it kind of just gets solved.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, but it won't destroy the whole world, but it'll destroy this whole entire barren landscape we're fighting on right now. And I might die. Then it turns into, no, I'm going to save you, brother. And somehow miraculously is able to drive out or fly out of the whole deal.
Yeah.
Um,
He gets saved by, like, Optimus Prime almost sacrifices himself to blow up this machine.
almost.
And when he's getting ready to fly like into the portal or whatever's being destroyed, then the human in the Tron suit, Tiny, is able to like hold his hand and keep him from going into I'm like, I need an explanation for some of this.
I watched a YouTube video about this. It seemed like this was like somebody was the writer that was writing this was doing a great job with it. He falls asleep as child, somehow gets a hold of this, writes the end of it. Nobody ever checks it, and they just send it back in. Call it good. Like I thought that was a pretty good representation of what this.
I mean,
this was
kind of,
here.
yeah, a little bit, yeah. The third act has cool like action scenes, but it's definitely like at the expense of logic and good storytelling. I think the first 2/3 of this movie is actually pretty solid.
Yep, I'd say the first 2/3 is good. That last ending scene, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
There was nothing that be destroyed. It was just like, let's watch everybody start fighting and do all this. There's no buildings being destroyed. There's no bombs being dropped. Nothing like that. So it's like CGI work I thought was very questionable in some ways. I don't know. Didn't much like it. And then last thing, even though I've kind of already done 4, last thing of all this, Rise of the Beasts. Where did they rise up from? Did they rise up and I don't know. I thought Rise of the Beast would be a lot more focused on the Beast compared to this is a Transformers movie, and then we're going to throw in maybe 10% of the movie with the Beasts.
That's a good point. Is that like it kind of the trailers mislead you into thinking that the Maximals play a much larger portion of the movie that they actually do, but they're more for like exposition and moving the character along, and then they're there for the final battle. And that's pretty much it. There's some interesting interactions between like the Maximals and the Autobots and the humans, because the Maximals actually learn to live with human tribes and understand humans' value, which Optimus didn't understand at the beginning. So that part was good, but it felt weird because it's like Rise of the Beasts, and it's like the beasts that are in there for 20 minutes of the 2-hour runtime. And that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So
Three things I did like. Liked how Optimus's character was looked over. He was a lot
Yeah, I
different
did.
than a lot of the other ones. He was somebody that had to learn something and learn a valuable lesson, like you kind of mentioned. Like that aspect of things. Um, Second piece of it, I thought Scourge was pretty good. I thought some of the voice acting was really, really good,
Yeah,
especially we talked
love it.
about already with
Pete Davidson.
Pete Davidson. Thought Peter Dinklage did a pretty good job. I thought that was a pretty cool dynamic.
Pete Davidson and Peter Dinklage.
This is the War of the Peters here.
Mhm.
Rise of the Peters is what it should have been more of.
Dude, heck yeah. It's a great name for a movie.
And then last piece of it, I thought they did look aesthetically really cool, especially the hawk.
Yeah.
That was pretty neat. So that's my 3 good. That's my 3.5 bad.
I agree with all that. So I'll put my stamp of approval for everything that he said. I don't disagree with a single part of that.
Yeah.
But I rated it a little higher because I could see myself rewatching this movie and still having fun with it.
Yep.
Like, because I can still rewatch the first 2/3 of this movie and be like, oh yeah, this is pretty cool. But it gets to that third act and I'm like, yeah, the battle scenes are cool, but like I'm more interested in the dynamics between the characters more than I am the action scenes actually, which is odd for a Transformers movie. You're supposed to be like, oh yeah, you want the battles, the whatever. A lot of the cool fights happen actually earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
Last
those
thing
are our
to say.
thoughts.
Last thing to say about it. I think the first two of the Transformers franchise were just better placed, honestly, in American culture.
Yeah.
Because I think we were coming off of the 9/11 attacks, personally, and the military had a big piece to play in the
Mhm.
first two that brought a lot of American patriotism and, oh, Americans can fight Transformers as well, too, since we have the technology and all the know-how to do this. And
Yeah.
I thought that added a whole different level of things. So, in my mind, I don't know if Transformers in the future
Mhm.
will always be as big as they once were, just because we've never been in that phase of a country.
Yeah, I don't know if it ever will, and
Yeah.
I definitely agree. Like timing is everything, and whenever you release your movie around things like Across the Spider Verse and The Little Mermaid and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny and these other types of movies, um, you're that's the problem with summer blockbusters, and I think that I understand why a lot of big movies are released in the summer because that's when people are on vacation. That's
Yep.
when people are,
Have time.
have time and they're out and about. But I'm going to say this real quick, and this is going to be like my final thoughts, not really even on the movie, just in general. Um, Movie companies should focus on spreading out their movies more over the course of different months and not specific ones. Marvel has a bad tendency to do it in like November and Decembers and like Marches and Aprils and Mays. And they don't really touch the other ones. And I think that since they're slowing down progress on things like shows, they should focus on spreading it out more because when you have so many of these blockbuster films coming out in the same 2-month period, people are either going to get burnt out or they're not going to watch half of them. Because guess what? They have a lot of time in the summer, but they are spending most of this time going on vacation or spending time with their families or doing all these external activities. They're not always going to a bunch of movies. And it really depends on how you market it. I would project that like Transformers would do better if you kind of have it more in a release month that's kind of away from other things where you can spend more like attention on it. Like the fall time. Fall time honestly would be a perfect time. You're getting into school, the kids are getting into school, and during the school time, during the first semester, Transformers movie comes out. I think that's the perfect time for a Transformers film. But that's just me.
Yep. That's our show, folks. If you liked it, make sure to hit the like button, whether you're watching us on YouTube, which again, we have the videos going on for now on, Spotify, Apple Music, whatever you'd like to check out some podcasts. So thanks everybody for jumping on. Stay classy, Bowls.